Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read and have them all be considered as one.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read and that all amendments be considered as one. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill deals with how we would fill vacancies in office, and under the current bill, it calls for us to fill vacancies based on the party of the office holder at the time of their resignation. My amendment would change that to make the vacancy be filled based on the party of the office holder at the time of their election. This is essentially codifying the Supreme Court's decision of a couple years ago when Senator Hall changed his party. And I think I can speak about this because I was in the legislature the last time we changed that vacancy statute, and the situation of people changing their parties was not contemplated when we made that last revision to the statute. So not necessarily criticizing the Supreme Court for reaching the wrong decision. I don't think they necessarily did. I think that we were trying to fit a round peg into a square hole in that situation. But I think going forward, it's important that we make clear that we're going to honor and respect the will of the voters. I think if people want to change parties in the office they're in, that's fine. That's their will to do. But if they leave that office, we should always revert back to the will of the people. I can think of a handful of nefarious situations that could occur if we pass this bill as it's stated right now. For one, I could all of a sudden declare that I'm a part of the Communist Party. I could declare I'm a Nazi Party. I could decide I'm going to retire and I'm going to create the Palumbo Party, and I can invite my wife to join and close off the membership of the party and then resign. She's going to have to be my successor. The governor could tell me he wants me to become a Republican, and if I do, he's going to give me a cabinet secretary post with a $100,000 job. And then I can do that. I mean, there's all kinds of corrupt and unusual situations that we would not want to occur in the current state this bill is in. I just think that, and that's beside the fact that I think we would be the only state in the country who would do it this way. Based on the research that we've done, there's no other state who would fill a vacancy based on the party that the person resigned in as opposed to how they were elected. Why do we want to be... There's a reason no one else does this, because it invites corruption. It invites problems. I mean, you're never going to have a problem if you revert to the will of the people. That's what this amendment seeks to do. It's really not a partisan issue. I don't think it benefits one party over the other. It's just to do what I think is right in this situation. This is not going to happen very often. It's why this wasn't contemplated the last time we dealt with this statute, because very rarely does someone change parties, and even more rarely does someone change parties and then resign in their office. But if that happens, I just submit to you, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, that we should respect the will of the people in that situation. It will prevent any kind of nefarious situation. It will prevent any kind of corruption coming in, and it will prevent, us having to live with a member in office who's, lost their mind and done something crazy and then resigned, and then we have to stick with a member in the Communist Party. I mean, I'm not talking about changing from Democrat to Republican. I mean, anything can happen here, and to avoid an absurd result, if we just honor the will of the people, we'll all be okay. And I would encourage adoption of this amendment.
Further discussion? The senator from Morgan wished to close debate. Further discussion before I recognize the senator.
No.
Oh, it's his amendment. I'm sorry. Senator from Morgan.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment, and I will preface my remarks by saying anytime I find myself in disagreement with my colleague from the 17th, I think very hard about where I am. I take his arguments that seriously, and in that sense, I will confess that I may also be a member of the Palumbo Party. I'm not sure. But I disagree with my good friend from the 17th. First of all, it needs to be spoken here that if the amendment is adopted, it will effect a change in the law. While there's some amendment to this section of the code in the bill, unamended, we're not changing the law. And as the senator from Kanawha correctly said, I think the statute was amended in 2011 and then again in 2013, but the effect of the bills before us is simply to keep in place the current law, which is that when a vacancy occurs in the legislature, the governor must fill it from the political party of the person who occupied the seat that he held at the time the vacancy was created. We know that's law because we had a Supreme Court opinion a year ago telling us that. We do change the language in this a little bit, but not to change the substance of it. The gentleman from Kanawha's amendment would change that to what there were some who argued that the law should be, but was not. And so there are some language changes in the statute apart from the change that the gentleman's amendment would propose to make. And that's necessary because even though it was clear to me and many of us what the law said, it was not clear to our former governor. So number one, we're not changing the law, we're keeping the law if we reject the gentleman's amendment. I will concede that it is possible somebody could change to the Communist Party or the Palumbo Party and resign and create an issue in that regard, but I think it's largely implausible and improbable. I won't say it could not happen, but I don't think it's a serious enough concern to justify changing the law. Was interested to hear the discussion, and I think Senator from Kanawha may be right in the way we do it and would continue to do it if his amendment is rejected. I think we are in a minority of states. This is sort of off the subject of the amendment, but I would let the members of this body who aren't on the Judiciary Committee know that we're in the minority of states in another way, apparently, and that is to let the governor be involved at all. And when we were in committee, we considered a committee substitute that would say the vacancies are going to be filled by the presiding officers of the two houses, but that was, even though it was chairman's choice, was rejected by the committee and is not part of the bill as it lies before us on the floor. The people elect a person. They don't elect a party. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. Whether we're talking about Daniel Hall or any current member of this body, those of you who are elected, and some of you have been re-elected to this body multiple times, are much more than the member of a single political party. You know, you're a person who lives in a community, who represents people, who's available to answer their questions and concerns, to introduce legislation. And so to say the only criterion is about political party is incorrect. We have to presume, Mr. President, when a delegate or a senator takes an action in one of the legislative chambers, whether it's introduction of a bill or a vote upon a resolution or a bill, or the registration or adherence to a political party. It's an action that he or she is taking in the interests of his or her constituents. And quite frankly, that's what Daniel Hall did. And he believed that he was acting in a way that benefited his constituents, the people he represented. And we have to respect that. And we respect it when someone like that leaves the legislature by honoring that decision he made as part of his conversation with his constituents. I'm not terribly worried about the possibility that a person could be convinced to switch party in exchange for then leaving the legislature and taking a cabinet job. I think the more as I thought about it, and it's a good argument, but I think it's already a crime. I think that probably falls within the definition of bribery under our state law. So with my greatest respect and admiration, as always, to the senator from Kanawha, I urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
Further discussion, the senator from Harrison.
Well, the senator sure makes you feel good about voting against you, I tell you, when he's done. I appreciate that. You know, we're all square one here. This doesn't favor either party. So let's use some common sense here. You know, let's first of all do a reality check. People do vote for the person a lot. A lot of times they vote geography. It's a big deal in my county, where I come from, whether you're from one of the big cities or from outside one of them. And they do vote party. I mean, let's face it, the Republicans have a following, Democrats have a following, the Libertarians have a following. My concern is this is an anti-corruption bill, because nothing's going to stop anybody from changing parties while they're seated here. What this will stop is shenanigans right before you resign in order to do something that benefits you, and that's hard to prove. I mean, sure there's bribery charges, sure there's corruption charges, but it's really hard to prove when it's something done behind closed doors that only involves two people. This is a smart move. It's not a big deal. We're all going to go on. Legislature's going to go on. But why would we want to give somebody the opportunity to change parties right before they resign in order to get a political favor for themselves? Why would we want to give somebody the opportunity to change parties right before they resign to upset the balance in the legislature? And that can go in either direction. What we have here is a chance to apply some good old-fashioned common sense that when you're elected from a party, that's where your replacement comes from. That benefits both sides, that benefits every party in this state, and surely we don't want to be in a situation where a governor would have to appoint a communist to a seat in this legislature because somebody switched to the Communist Party after they were elected. The people elect you, they elect where you're from, they elect who you are, and they elect the party you came from, and that's what we should stick with here. I'm in favor of the gentleman's amendment. Thank you, sir.
Further discussion? Further discussion before I recognize the senior senator from the 17th to close debate. Senior senator from the 17th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this really has nothing to do with our former colleague, Senator Hall, and his replacement, the senator from Wyoming, who does a fine job. I mean, I think the Supreme Court may have made the right decision with the statute that didn't contemplate this situation in any way, shape, or form. What we're talking about is going forward. And just for an example, we have a delegate in the House of Delegates who has switched to an independent. What if he resigns? How's he going to be replaced? There's no executive committee for independents. How's that going to work? I mean, we are inviting problems with this system. I mean, we've mentioned 5 of them today. There's no problem you can invite by saying if someone changes parties and resigns, we're going to fill that spot with how they were elected. I mean, I understand we do elect people. We don't elect parties necessarily, but people care about your party. I mean, I'd like to see anyone run on the ballot as a communist. You may be the best person in the world. You're not going to get elected. People care about your party. So the reality is, you know, no other state does it this way, and there's a reason for that. No other state wants to invite these absurd results. No other state wants to invite this corruption. At the end of the day, if a member wants to switch the parties to a different party, that's fine. But once they resign, they lose their right to control that seat, and it should go back to the will of the people. It should not be the will of that one person. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the senior senator from the 17th. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes appear to have it. Division. Thank you. All those in favor of the senator's amendment from the 17th will please rise. Please be seated. Those opposed will please rise. What, 14? Please be seated. On this question, there being 14 ayes, 19 nays, less than a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the amendment rejected. Further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.